The female action hero. She's actually been present in movies for over 100 years. Back in the 1900s, women dominated action cinema. MovieWeb.com wrote in 2022 that in the 1910s, the biggest action heroes were all women. So let's take a trip down apparently forgotten lane to chronicle the journey of actresses who kicked ass long before ass kicking was even a thing. And that made no sense, but you get my point. My criteria for this retrospective is pretty simple. It has to be an action movie featuring a female character in a prominent leading role. Luckily for me, action cinema is the most cross-pollinated genre of them all. Action horror, action comedy, action sci-fi. I tried to judge each movie by the decade that it was raised in, so even though the swashbucklers of the 30s and 40s are pretty tame compared to today's martial arts standards, they're still action movies. And I'm gonna stretch this definition a little bit around the 1940s, but you'll see why. Here are the questions that prompted me to invent this video. It's widely believed that female-driven action films aren't successful. It's widely believed that Pam Grier and Sigourney Weaver were the first action heroines. It's widely believed that men don't like female-led action movies, but why? Why, and also why? These were the questions simmering in my brain pan, so let's see what we can learn in this retrospective of the female action hero. Before talkies became the rage, silent films were cinema. Sure, we can look to guys like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin for popularizing silent action movies, but they didn't come around until the 1920s. The way was paved for them by ladies like Helen Holmes, who rose to fame chasing after robbers and jumping onto moving trains. Then there was Helen Gibson, trick rider and rodeo performer, who was considered to be the first American professional stunt woman. These ladies got their shot because of directors like J. Searle Dawley, who based his first movie on the works of a female writer, Mary Shelley, who was inspired to write her book by a dude named Lord Byron. Weird. Girl helps guy, guy helps girl, girl guy, girl guy. It's almost like when men and women work together, we can make so much cool stuff. But anyway, then there was Mary Fuller. The Women Film Pioneers Project called Fuller a new type of female protagonist. But some say that even before her was perhaps the real grandmother of action heroines, Jean Guntier. By 1910, she had already written, acted in, and performed stunts for 22 movies, and would go on to do dozens more. She ran with the men, dove from explosions, and carried out spectacular acts. Throughout the teen years of the early 1900s, the silent films featured some of the most heroic female images in silent cinema. These characters paved the way for action stunt performers like Mabel Normand, prolific actresses, screenwriters, and directors like Grace Kennard, and of course, the legendary Pearl White, who was also known as the heroine of 1,000 stunts. Film scholar Ben Singer estimates that between 1912 and 1920, about 60 action movies with female protagonists were released. As the silent film era gave way to feature-length movies, the silent films were relegated to the past, leaving these female action heroes almost completely forgotten by today's filmmakers, and apparently by today's actors and actresses as well.
I remember when I was doing Hunger Games, nobody had ever put a woman in the lead of an action movie.
What?
Now, to be fair, Jennifer Lawrence eventually corrected her quote, but regardless, it seems a lot of people don't realize what an incredibly long journey the strong female action hero has had. Hold up. Before I go any further, let's make sure we're on the same page about something, because there's a lot of discussion and controversy over what it means to be a strong female character.
Want a divorce?
So here's a definition. Medium.com wrote in 2018, there is a common misconception when it comes to understanding the term strong female character. Many people understand it as a cry for heroic, physically strong females leading the plot. While this would not be unappreciated, strong in this phrase does not mean literally strong. We need a range of well-written female characters. They can be weak-willed, evil, and/or unlikable as long as they are strong in the sense that they are believable. Springbook ASMR agreed. When we talk about strong female characters, we don't necessarily mean righteous female characters or heroic female characters. We just mean very well-written, strongly written females. But as is typical of Hollywood, they see success with a character like Sarah Connor or Wonder Woman and learn the wrong lesson. Strong woman equals manly woman. But if you polled most women, the last thing any of them would want to be compared to is a man. And yet, that's exactly what these modern movies are doing. And it's not working. Many, if not most, modern-day female action heroes lack anything that makes them uniquely women. Most of them are an oversimplification of a single idea. These movies take a view of women that doesn't represent the complex spectrum of women in the world, leaving the characters bland and, frankly, weak. So if I may, I'm going to alter the phrase strong female character to strongly written female character, since that is ultimately what it all boils down to. And I'm going to show you why a little later, but let's continue this little investigation, shall we? The silent film heroines risked life and limb for entertainment, and often because they had no other choice, but sadly, much of their efforts have been forgotten. This is where the action heroine hit a rough patch. The female stunt performers of the silent films had a hard time transitioning into feature-length films. Stick with me for a minute and I'll explain why. Data from the American Film Institute archive and the Internet Movie Database suggests that from 1910 to 1920, women actors comprised roughly 40% of casts, and their involvement in other areas of film production was even lower. What was once a field dominated by women experienced a massive turnover. Now, there are lots of theories and opinions about what happened. Some say that due to the quality of early sound recording devices, many of the popular actors and actresses from the silent era didn't possess the right voice for speaking roles. Others say that the transition into the Great Depression led to renewed surges in illness and poor mental health, which was a factor in the fates of some silent film stars. Silent film actress Clara Bow articulated the challenge of moving from silent pantomime-style acting to talking roles when she said, "I hate talkies. They're stiff and limiting. You lose a lot of your cuteness because there's no chance for action." I'm sure all of these, along with other factors, played a part, but data scientist Louis Amaral of Northwestern Now has another explanation. He says that between 1915 and 1920, the film industry condensed from a somewhat diverse collection of independent filmmakers to just 5 studios: Warner Brothers, Paramount, MGM, Fox, and RKO Pictures. These companies were run by men, and they controlled the industry. Daniel Egan of Smithsonian Magazine wrote in 2012 that, in the 1920s, screen actresses could be spunky, even tomboyish, but it took many years before they would get the chance to be action stars again.
I've been in a lot of explosions. I was wondering why you look so frightfully scarred.
But the early days of cinema weren't all bad for women. The top movie-making stars between 1932 and 1938 were all women. Mary Pickford, Hollywood's first major movie star, became the highest-paid performer in the industry. She later became one of the most powerful show business executives of her time, so well, there's that. The Western really rose to prominence during the 1930s, and although it was incredibly rare for a woman to get in on the action, there were a few standouts. Annie Oakley and Belle Starr were depicted in a few movies, shooting guns and competing with the guys, though often for the purpose of eventually falling in love with them. Honestly, the 1930s were a difficult time for everyone. The Great Depression was in full swing and Hollywood was hurting. The movies were filled with women working and drinking and carousing and generally acting as well or as bad as the men, and this period of cinema was filled with a lot of gender cliches.
You're mine, do you understand? Mine to do with as I please.
In an industry dominated by studios driven by male interests, the action movie heroine got less and less of a chance to shine. And also, action movies in general weren't a big thing. Even many of the westerns and crime thrillers were more drama than anything. Gunshots abounded, sure, but the eye-popping stunts that made the silent film so popular seemed few and far between. Cinema was melodramatic, interspersed with adventure, romance, and comedy. A large part of it had to do with the limits of technology at the time. Hidden microphones restricted movement to avoid catching extraneous sounds and changed the entire dynamic of film acting. Action films had a hard time adjusting to this.
We're not going to sit back and give up everything we worked so hard for without a fight.
But there was Texas horsewoman and stunt performer Betty Miles, who rocked American B-movies throughout the 30s and 40s, and Evelyn Finley, who was known as the most accomplished stunt rider in the Western genre throughout the 40s and 50s. There may not have been as many action movie women jumping onto moving trains, but there were definitely awesome women. Take the 1942 black comedy To Be or Not to Be. Carol Lombard is intelligent, flirty, and a key member of the Polish resistance. In His Girl Friday, a film from 1940, Rosalind Russell plays Hildy Johnson, a smart, fearless, brilliant journalist. She eventually becomes respected by her fellow journalists, who are all men, by the way, who recognize what a talented writer she is. Notorious featured an incredible performance by Ingrid Bergman, a recovering alcoholic who marries a Nazi sympathizer in order to pass information to the American government. These were incredible, deep, three-dimensional roles back in the day, and honestly are head and shoulders above a lot of the bland, politically motivated female characters we see today. These may not have been action movies, but these movies were about women taking action.
Go ahead and stare. I'm not ashamed. I know you want me to tear my clothes off. What's it for? So you can go home when the show's over and strut before your wives and sweethearts? I'm sure they see through you just like we do.
I'm making this point because too many people have this idea in their head that prior to the 1970s, all the women in movies were depicted in horribly sexist ways. Yeah, sure, gender equality was pretty one-sided, and yeah, okay, John Wayne spanked Elizabeth Allen in Donovan's Reef, and Maureen O'Hara in McClintock, but it wasn't all like that. There were some amazingly well-crafted female characters on screen, and they've mostly been forgotten. Julia Tena de la Nuez wrote in January 2024 on The Egalitarian that the reason the female protagonists from the 30s and 40s resonate in ways that the ones today do not is because World War I had pushed women out into the workplace on an unprecedented scale to take over the jobs that men had left behind.
More choices meant more life experiences, which gave way to more interesting characters being written.
This all changed after World War II, as the American government sought to get the men back into work and the women back into the house.
Come on in.
You come out.
You come in.
This is why the 1950s saw more actresses playing complacent housewives and damsels in distress. At this time in American culture, the stay-at-home mom was highly valued, and Hollywood reflected that. But this kinda made sense. After the war, Americans were horny. Women and men were desperate to return home, find a suburb, and pound out some babies. And after killing a bunch of Nazis, gosh dang it, God bless them. Housewives, homemakers, you ladies rocked. I know, because my grandma was one, and she was the rockiest of all grandmas who rocked. The 1950s saw swashbuckling heroines like Jean Peters in Anne of the Indies, and Maureen O'Hara in Against All Flags and At Sword's Point. Biographer Aubrey Malone wrote, "When it came to dexterity in action, O'Hara was a nonpareil." And the documentary Fall Girl, My Life as a Western Stunt Double is the story of Martha Crawford Cantorini, who was one of the most acclaimed horse trainers and show riders of Hollywood's elite female performers, doubling for actresses like Eleanor Parker, Ann Baxter, and Shirley MacLaine. Stunt Women: The Untold Story is an eye-opening look at female action movies and the stunt women who made them popular. The documentary, and the book it's based on, says that as movies became increasingly popular and more profitable, women became marginalized in the industry. Many female stunt roles were performed by men wearing women's clothing, a practice known as wigging. Until the 1960s, there was little stunt work available for women, and even less to women of color. To say the 1960s were a confusing time for America would be an understatement. New technology, the constant threat of nuclear war, the expectations post-World War II adults put upon their children to make society perfect, white kids flourishing while minorities were getting oppressed, and then all the drugs. America was really kind of losing its collective mind. The dawn of the sexual revolution began to make many women feel more free and independent, but unfortunately, the way that power was depicted on screen wasn't the most flattering. Faster, Pussycat, Kill, Kill. I can't even say that title without cracking up. This movie turned typical gender roles on their heads, featuring an almost unprecedented level of violent women taking what they wanted by force. A publication by ResearchGate in 2016 said the physical power exuded by the gang's riveting leader is notable even by today's standards, but her gratuitous sexualization sends mixed messages about existing for herself versus being an object for others to visually consume. And that was kind of the main problem with female heroes of the 1960s. People wanted to see them, Hollywood wanted to show them, actresses wanted to be them, but nobody quite knew how to do it without being, you know.
You time that heat with an hourglass.
Someone mentioned my figure?
Like I said, the 60s were pretty confusing. According to ResearchGate.net, female-led action movies comprised less than 10% of action films in the 1960s. A pathetic number, for sure. There were a few great action movies with female leads, but one of the best has got to be Bonnie and Clyde. Faye Dunaway is terrific as the strong-willed Bonnie Parker in this action-packed, stylized, gory crime flick. And Estelle Parsons even won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. In the 1970s, action movies were back, baby, with an increase in not just the number of action movies made, but the number of action films featuring some tough ladies. Many of them were of the exploitation genre, but hey, they were trying. Vigilante Pam Grier took out bad guys in movies like Coffy and Foxy Brown, and of course, the princess of them all, Carrie Fisher. When the boys of Star Wars showed up to rescue her and then botched the attempt, Leia grabbed a blaster and took over. Return of the Jedi gets some flack for the metal bikini scene, but I give this one a pass because, first of all, to see a prominent character brought so low only to break free is great storytelling. And second, Leia wasn't meant to be oogled at. Ogled? I'm not sure how you say it, but the point is, Jabba the Hutt's enslavement of her was looked at as a crime, which is why audiences were cheering when she finally choked the life out of that ugly, perverted green worm. On the small screen, actresses like Yvonne Craig punched her way across television sets as Batgirl, while Linda Carter did the same as Wonder Woman. And Nichelle Nichols as Uhura from Star Trek broke boundaries for women of color. But for all the doors the action heroines opened in the 1970s, the action women of the 80s took those doors and blew them off the hinges. GOAT.com said in 2018 that the 80s and 90s were a golden age for women-led action movies, spearheaded by Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. But can more people talk about her co-star Jeanette Goldstein as Vasquez, please? Few have done so well at depicting strong female characters like James Cameron. From Ellen Ripley to Sarah Connor to Neytiri, Cameron's female characters are never one-dimensional. They always strike a balance between capable, feminine, fierce, maternal, and independent. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they fall, sometimes they need a hand.
Come with me if you want to live.
Although Linda Hamilton gets more acclaim for her action-centric performance in Terminator 2, her character's arc in Terminator 1 isn't to be effed with.
You're terminated.
The incomparable Grace Jones battled foes elbow to elbow with Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. And then there was my personal favorite 80s female action star. Hold on. Let me say that again because I really want to build up to this. Rothrock is a real-life ninja, performing most of her own stunts. She was a skilled combatant who didn't require an accommodating stuntman to sell her hits. Unlike other actresses, Rothrock's characters may have been a little one-note, but so were her male counterparts like Jackie Chan and Richard Norton. The reason I mention her, though, is because she's the kind of real-life female action hero that doesn't often get the spotlight, and I take that personally. Cynthia Rothrock was awesome, and she deserved more fame, period. Throughout the 80s and 90s, moviegoers were exposed to a broad range of female leads who were capable, tough, beautiful, and they kicked ass on their terms because
I said so, that's why.
The rapid growth of female action movies continued in the 1990s. As the men got toned, so did the ladies, as epitomized by the physical prowess of Sharon Stone, Demi Moore, and Carrie-Anne Moss. The 90s gave us Natalie Portman in The Professional, and Christy Swanson and Sarah Michelle Gellar as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There was also ladies like Helen Hunt in Twister, who may not have made a living punching bad guys, but she was a competent, clever, driven female protagonist whose sole purpose wasn't just to be the love interest. Sandra Bullock practically built her career from the success of one of the greatest action movies of the 90s, Speed. Starting out as a mere passenger on the explosive bus, Bullock's character steps forward to help get the rest of the passengers to safety. Yeah, at the end, she's a damsel in distress, but there's a time and a place for that, and that's okay. Then there was the legendary Geena Davis. Whether she was in Thelma and Louise, Cutthroat Island, or The Long Kiss Goodnight, Davis routinely aced her portrayal of fleshed-out action movie heroines that weren't just there for eye candy. Speaking of eye candy, I can't not mention the unbelievably gorgeous Mila Jovovich's star-making role as Lilu in The Fifth Element. Yeah, I know she starts the movie practically naked, but it serves the story and her character. Lilu goes through an incredible arc, which gives Jovovich the role of a lifetime as she goes from naive and scared to confident and capable to the savior of the entire human race. Female-led action films were having an incredible upswing. In the 2000s, Angelina Jolie epitomized casting perfection as Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Her other notable action movie roles include Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Gone in 60 Seconds. Kate Beckinsale won hearts as the vampire Selene in Underworld. She was deadly, she was beautiful, she fired guns without blinking, and yet she was vulnerable and a bit of a romantic if you ask me. No character should ever be defined by a single trait, since we are all the sum of a vast array of emotions, talents, motivations, and preferences, and few envelop this better than Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. Through the course of Quentin Tarantino's two-part epic, the bride goes through a gamut of emotions that any actress would salivate over, including grief, agony, terror, laughter, sweetness, confusion, maternal instinct, and pissed offness. Thurman's performance in the scene where she realizes her daughter is still alive is a powerhouse display of conflicting emotions. Just look at her face. That's awesome stuff, man. You feel every second of it. The first decade out of the 2000s gave us a bunch of awesome female action heroes. The writing wasn't always perfect, but it seemed that Hollywood was finally starting to take the idea of a female action hero seriously. Unfortunately, it wouldn't last much longer. In the next decade, the female hero got a power-up, as the mostly male-dominated landscapes of comic book movies saw some of the strongest female action heroes ever put to screen. These characters weren't just there to have chemistry with a male co-star, they were different and powerful in their own ways. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman proved a hit with both critics and audiences, and Nebula had one of the best multi-film arcs of any female character in the MCU. And because she's played by my fellow Scot, Karen Gillan, Nebula's got a permanent place in my heart. And even outside the superhero genre, action ladies were rocking the screen. Letty was a clever strategist and combatant. Katniss Everdeen was a reluctant hero driven by compassion and family love. Jen Erso was motivated by loss, oppression, and desperation. Rita Vertransky was motivated by a strong instinct for justice and was physically and mentally equipped through her military training. And, of course, that killer mech suit. And then, it all kinda went downhill. The Harvard Crimson wrote of Captain Marvel in 2019, "You're not fighting for equality by proving you can punch harder. It's only by respecting the humanity in one another that we can understand the real reasons why every person can save the world in their own individual way. Just substituting a woman into the existing hierarchy of physical dominance doesn't change anything." In the last 10 years or so, it seems we've had fewer strongly written female characters, especially in action movies. Meanwhile, there's been an increase in underdeveloped, poorly written heroines whose sole purpose is to be a kind of political lightning rod.
And by the way, the women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Women.
But still, many of these female-led action films made bank. And you know who was paying to go see those action movies? Dudes. On average, men make up the largest portion of audience members when it comes to action cinema, regardless of whether the leading actor is male or female. Take the audience for something like Underworld Awakening. According to Vulture, the action horror vampire flick led by Kate Beckinsale was decidedly more male. The same goes for the 2023 box office dud The Marvels, which saw 68% of ticket sales going to men. Even the R-rated action thriller Atomic Blonde, starring the always incredible Charlize Theron, captured a 52% male audience. But according to Elizabeth Banks, director of the disastrously received Charlie's Angels reboot in 2019, if this movie doesn't make money, it reinforces a stereotype in Hollywood that men don't go see women in action movies. And Banks isn't alone. When the all-female Ghostbusters reboot bombed, director Paul Feig blamed toxic male fans. It seems like whenever a movie starring a strong female hero fails at the box office, the easiest target that people in Hollywood go after are men. But in a 2019 article called Go Woke, Go Broke, Charlie's Angels Bombs at the Box Office, The World of Real wrote, "The large elephant in the room, which nobody wants to talk about, is that men make up more than 60% of box office attendance. While men will watch action movies starring women aimed at male audiences, and have consistently for decades, American female audiences have rarely supported female-targeted action movies, whether they starred women or men. So the argument that men don't like female action heroes is a silly one, when ticket sales show that the majority of people who go to see these kinds of movies are men. And on top of that, these movies have never been a big draw for most women, which is a big reason why there aren't more of them. Yet, too many critics think it's lazy and sexist for not having more female action heroes, but it's not sexist when the tracking figures indicate how much of a genre the market can take. So I think the question of how come we can't have more female action heroes is irrelevant. I think the question should be, why aren't they better? In a time when female-centered action movies should be at their peak, they actually feel a step down from where they used to be. Today, we're inundated with one-dimensional female heroes, and they're created by angry-sounding writers who think the goal of their movie is to smash the patriarchy.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be when it fits a woman.
When all audiences are clamoring for are good, multi-dimensional, relatable characters. One thing that may be a contributing factor to the decline of women in action movies at this time, and this is probably going to be the most controversial part of this video, but don't hate me for saying this, it's not right or wrong, it's just a minor observation. And this was actually pointed out to me by the Canadian Women in Film Museum when they wrote that between 1922 and 1925, half of all films were written by women, and the important social issues of the day were raised by women screenwriters. This seems to be a trend even today, that the majority of female filmmakers, or more than the men at least, want to make movies about political hot topics, when this isn't really something that most audiences want in their entertainment. Gosh, it sure would be nice to be able to substantiate that claim. Okay, here we go. The New York Times wrote in 2021 that politics and entertainment annoys audience members. The article quoted a producer of the Oscars who spoke on the condition of anonymity. He said, minute-by-minute post-show ratings analysis indicate that vast swaths of people turn off their televisions when celebrities started to opine on politics. CNN wrote in January 2021 that politics in pop culture needs a timeout. And Forbes wasn't afraid to spell it out. Dear celebrities, research shows that your political opinions hurt your cause more than help it. A 2019 survey by Hill Harris X indicated that 65% of people don't care about Hollywood's political endorsements. I mean, if politics truly influenced audiences as much as Hollywood and some critics seem to think, then Joker would have brought about anarchy, and Little Women would have ended misogyny. But the truth is that most people don't view movies as a place to get political ideas. Now, movies have always carried political leanings, sure. Every writer and filmmaker is going to bring their beliefs into their art, and you can read as much politics as you want into just about anything. That's never been the issue. It's when the underlying agenda becomes so prevalent that it distracts from the artistic medium. That's when audiences start to roll their eyes. Take, for example, the amazing success of a movie like Wonder Woman. Men loved it, women loved it, it made a boatload of cash, and it didn't contain any preachy political messages. Compare that to something like She-Hulk, which was widely panned for having heavy-handed gender politics. This show was largely written, directed, and created by women with an agenda. Even popular movies like Barbie and Captain Marvel, despite killing it at the box office, have been slammed by some critics who call them misandry propaganda. This seems to happen whenever anyone in Hollywood, man or woman, comes out with comments that are largely rejected by the fanbase and their movie's popularity takes a dive. Now, take all of this with a grain of salt, because this is the kind of subjective observation that's hard to verify. But in all my research on this video, it became apparent to me that when creators, producers, directors, writers, actors focus less on pushing political issues and more on making entertaining content, they experience more success. But take it or leave it. This is just an observation. You don't have to rain fire and brimstone on me in the comments section, alright? I'm just saying. Okay, I think I need to recap the 3 questions that got me started on this journey and then wrap things up. Question number 1. It's widely believed that female-driven action films aren't successful. I think I've managed to show that the success of an action film has little to do with the gender of the star and more to do with how well they are written. However, a movie can bomb at the box office if it seems like the creative team behind the movie is more concerned with raising political talking points than entertaining. Question number 2. It's widely believed that Pam Grier and Sigourney Weaver were the first action heroines. I think the first action heroines were the pioneering women of the silent era. The first modern female action star could be Pam Grier, but personally, I think that honor goes to Faye Dunaway. Question number 3. It's widely believed that men don't like female-led action movies. I'd say this has been thoroughly debunked. I mean, men love action movies. Men love women, so putting women in an action movie is a solid move. You know what men and women don't like? Bad writing, which is what this all boils down to, because this is an issue permeating much of current times Hollywood. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I'm not just talking about the female heroes. Look at these big-budget action movies. Bad writing, bad writing, bad writing. Let me close this video out before it becomes a full-fledged documentary. What's the solution to all of this? Well, it's hard to set any hard and fast rules because there are always exceptions. Sometimes the right actress can make a one-dimensional heroine fascinating, and the wrong creative team can ruin what is an otherwise great character. So it all depends, but bottom line, we need well-written female characters that are defined by more than what's between their legs or how much better they are than men at something. But we also need well-written weak women. Love interests, eye candy, and damsels in distress, because you know what? The real world is filled with these types of people, and heroes can come out of any one of them. Be they nerds, leaders, rebels, comedians, girls that need to learn new skills, girls that aren't the smartest person in the room, girls that need comfort, girls that aren't afraid to fall in love, and girls that need some help to succeed. It's great that Hollywood has been trying new things when it comes to depictions of female action heroes, but it's no stretch to say that they've been missing the mark lately, pushing out hollow, trite female heroes for some trending political topic, or believing that women like Pam Grier and Jennifer Lawrence were the first female action stars is a great disservice to the pioneers of action cinema that came before them. These women deserve to be remembered, and more than that, it's worth celebrating that at one point in time, action cinema flourished because of them. So thank you very much to all you action ladies, and to my grandma.